incarceration. This is the whole panel on incarceration crisis. We have some very excellent panel speakers here today. I'll tell you a little bit about each person, and then you will hear them speak on their topic. So we'll start at the end of the table with Pat Sparkle. He was the main curator of the show and had his reasons for selecting the work that he did. He's a political activist, sculptor, and artist for the last 47 years, Pat? Or 50? Okay, and 50. He will be speaking on the influence that art can have on bringing about change in the society. And we're so happy that all of you are here today because you are the people that can take this information with you back out into your homes and communities and help be the change that we all need. Next we have Christine Montana. She is a retired warden from a federal prison up in New York, and she is going to speak on Brian Stevenson's new book, Just Mercy, about the new Jim Crowism in our country. Next, we have Judge Perez, who was one of the judges for the Collaborative Court, and now supported by the Collaborative Court Foundation. And what they do at the Collaborative Court is try and prevent people from going into the court right in the very beginning instead of going to jail and getting a felony or getting an arrest record. They give them an alternative choice to take a different road and have a different program. And he will be speaking about that. Next we have Maurice Posley, our wonderful Pulitzer Prize winner that has written an award-winning journalistic paper, I guess is what you would say. You help me out, Maurice. On exoneration. And that's a really important topic that we hear. Fabian is coming down from LA. He's probably stuck in traffic, and he is going to talk about the homeboys industry with Dr. Father Gregory Boyd. He is on the other end of the spectrum when prisoners are first released. Then this is a pathway of support, of learning a trade, of having community support, helping to stay clean, and counseling. That is what's a big, big successful program up in LA, and I would love to see that start happening down here in Orange County. I have a resource sheet up here at the front, and anybody that wants to know more about what to get in touch with, who to get in touch with, where to join up, come and get one of these sheets and see if we can't put all these different groups in touch with each other and supporting each other. And last but not least is our retired public defender and social welfare worker. I asked him if he could give me a few ideas on what he would do to change our criminal justice system. And he wrote me back a 3-page single-spaced letter. So I saved him with a grand finale. So without further ado, we will start with Pat Sparkle, and take it. If you'll pass the mic down to him.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today, and I'd like to start out by saying that we are most fortunate to have this group of people together, and I want to thank Leslie and Greg for inviting me to participate with them in curating a show that I felt was so fundamentally important to our system, and we can see as what's going on with politics these days that it becomes an even more important consideration and discussion to have. So first off, I have to say, number one, that I'm very fortunate that I was born in this country. I have to say that because I have been allowed a certain level of freedom in exercising a lot of expression that I have, where I know that if I lived in another country, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd either be incarcerated or have my head removed from my body. And I say that not with levity. I say that with seriousness. Because when I finished graduate school, I realized that if I'm going to do this kind of artwork, I better have a day job. I need something that's going to allow me the latitude to express what I want to express. I've been very fortunate in a variety of ways because I have, number one, I fell in love with someone about 44 years ago, and she's still with me. It's amazing when I look at, as the rearview mirror gets larger in my life, and all of that retrospective thinking, it becomes clearer that she has been very supportive of not always my work, but she has always been supportive of the lifestyle that I've chosen. And in the development of our relationship over these years, she has gone from really quite a neophyte when it came to understanding anything about art history and art, to being the main art teacher in her school. So there have been a lot of positive issues that have gone along with it. Now, when you deal with socio-political work, you have to realize that the skin either gets very thick or you have to jump ship and you do something else. I've always said to people that if I wasn't doing this, I may as well be selling shoelaces, because this is what I feel is my truth. And I feel that there's truth is a relative perspective, that we all have kind of these grand kind of visions of what we would like to be doing. And certainly I'd like to do work that would fill this gallery or something as large as this gallery. Well, I have to temper it down a little bit, but I can still focus on the issues that are of concern to me. And the personalization of artwork is the #1 aspect of making art for me. I think you can be a great craftsperson, you can be a skilled technician, but unless you are doing something that comes from your heart, that reflects your journey in life, then you're doing something that is more about something else or someone else than it is about you. Now, as much as I try and attempt to express things that are genuinely or attempting to be genuine in my expression, I know that there is a level of influence that happens from a variety of sources. But the main thing that, if you want to, or what I have done in my life, is I've always tried to be truthful with who I am. And I've said, as I've gotten older and dealt with a lot of curatorial activity, the artists that don't get in or jury out of a show, what I say to them is that when you go home tonight and you're brushing your teeth and you're looking in that mirror, is this what you really want to do? Because most of the time when you're doing a personalized image that is reflecting what you feel is significant in the world and in your life, then you are doing something that is really out of the norm. You're doing something that may not be as popular as other forms may be. But the consolation, if it is that you are doing something that you love, and that you're doing something that may have meaning. And I think in the end analysis, that when you're doing something that manifests, you're manifesting the feelings in a physical form, whatever it may be, you are allowing that form to be shown to other people, and there may be a connection. Maybe, and I put that in quotes. You're never guaranteed that you're going to get the kind of response that you want or the discussion that you're trying to create, but you hope to just continue the consideration of the discussion. Now, as I've curated a lot of shows over the last 20 years, and the interest that I have, whether it is dealing with community projects or dealing with something on a much more serious thematic level like this show, is looking for that personalized type of image. And of course, there could be 50 more people in this show, but the concern that I had in laying out this show was that you didn't have wallpaper, that you had a structure where you could get the understanding of the individual expression. You can separate it from the margins that are around it so that you can individualize what each of these artists are trying to say. The back room, I don't know if you have visited it yet, but that was, instead of me putting an object in the show as an artist, I wanted to pay homage to someone that I felt was in a situation that, yeah, he created it himself. He murdered someone when he was 15, and he happened to be in Texas. Well, he spent 14 years in solitary confinement and learned how to draw. And what he learned to do is to express what his world is. So imagine, and I'll speak to more the males than the females, that you're 15 years old, right in the middle of your adolescence, and you are from Hispanic culture, you are machismo, and you are thrown in prison. You have no exercising of expression other than trying to keep a low key or mixing with the right people so that you won't be attacked, let's put it mildly. So here, what he has done is in the 14 years he was in solitary confinement, and he's been in 24 years now, he's 40, is that he has created his own world. And absolutely, when you look at that work, you will see that it is all about exaggeration. He has exaggerated every anatomical feature that you would have on a male or a female. He has exaggerated the drug, the death, the skeletal, the cultural activities that go on surrounding his life. And we'll see. I feel that it'll be interesting when he is finally paroled. He has to go through 2 parole hearings before he has the opportunity to have any kind of outside activity. That his work will never be what this is. This is very unique work. This is work that is never designed for the purpose of presentation. It comes from the inner core of the individual. So my participation in this, and I'm very honored to be with this group of people, is a treat. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Chris, are you ready to take it away? Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. During my 20-year Federal Bureau of Prisons career, from 1992 to 2012, while working in federal prisons, I was immersed in procedure, policy, security, and the daily routines inside a correctional setting. With each promotion and transfer, I also faced the challenge of acclimating to a new institution and a new position description with increasing responsibilities. The world inside the fence was all-consuming for me. I had been retired for 3 years when my youngest son handed me a book that he had had to read for a UCLA course and said, "Mom, you've got to read this." In writing The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, Michelle Alexander said, "I have a specific audience in mind, people who care deeply about racial justice, but who, for any number of reasons, do not fully appreciate the magnitude of the crisis faced by communities of color as a result of mass incarceration." Cornel West more strongly stated, the new Jim Crow is a grand wake-up call in the midst of a long slumber of indifference to the poor and vulnerable. Her subtle analysis shifts our attention to the actual substance of America's shame, the massive use of state power to incarcerate hundreds of thousands of young male and increasingly female people under the bogus guise of the war on drugs. Reading the new Jim Crow, and recently Bryan Stevenson's New York Times best-selling book, Just Mercy, has been a violent wake-up call for me to a nightmare: America's unjust criminal justice system. As I began to read the new Jim Crow, so much of the information was shocking and terribly upsetting. Had Alexandra's credentials not been so impressive and her rigorous decade of research so compelling, I might have tried to dismiss her premise. The drug war is the new Jim Crow. Alexander, a graduate of Stanford Law School and the Vanderbilt University, is a highly acclaimed civil rights attorney, advocate, and legal scholar who won a Soros Justice Fellowship that supported the writing of the new Jim Crow. I was ashamed of my ignorance, my lack of motivation to look beyond the fence to understand what was happening inside the fence. I saw that the majority of the inmates were people of color, and the majority were there for drug convictions. I didn't know that the U.S. imprisons a larger percentage of its black population than South Africa did at the heart of apartheid. I didn't know that during the 1990s, 80% of the drug arrests were for marijuana, and the percentage of drug arrests that led to prison quadrupled. I knew the inmate population was growing and the Bureau was building new prisons. What I didn't know was to what extent. In 1972, America incarcerated 300,000 people. By 1990, over 1 million. By 2001, over 2 million. And by 2016, 2.3 million. Between 1980 and 2010, the incarceration for women increased by 640%. America incarcerates 25% of the world's prisoners, more than any other country in the world. In 1980, $6.9 billion was spent on jails and prisons in the U.S. Today, that figure is $80 billion. Bryan Stevenson, a Harvard-educated lawyer and founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, a nonprofit legal assistance organization, said his book, Just Mercy, is about getting closer to mass incarceration and extreme punishment in America. It's about how easily we condemn people in this country and the most vulnerable, and the injustice we create when we allow fear, anger, and distance to shape the way we treat the most vulnerable among us. How did we become, in Stevenson's words, an unprecedentedly harsh and punitive nation whose highest court upheld the death penalty for juveniles and the retarded, and life without parole sentences for juvenile convictions? In 2003, when Orange County Superior Court Judge William Froberg sentenced 14-year-old Antonio Nunez to life without parole, he was the youngest person in the U.S. sentenced to imprisonment for life for a crime where no one was physically injured. Some states have no minimum age for prosecuting children as adults, sending children to adult prisons, some younger than 12 years old. What I didn't know was why. Alexander describes our nation's path from slavery to convict leasing, or legal slavery, to Jim Crow segregation, to mass incarceration as the evolving means of suppressing and controlling people of color. She did not reach this conclusion easily. 10 years ago, I would have argued strenuously against the central claim made here, namely that something akin to a racial caste system currently exists in the United States. The seeds of mass incarceration, the new form of Jim Crow, were sown by Richard Nixon in the 1970s, when he began calling for law and order, and a war on crime, declaring public enemy number one is drug abuse. In 1982, Ronald Reagan began a literal war on drugs, declaring drugs a threat to national security in his National Security Decision Directive. The same year, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a 40-year sentence for attempting to sell 9 ounces of marijuana. The 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act established long mandatory minimum sentences for low-level drug dealers and possession of crack. In 1991, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a life sentence for a first-time offender attempting to sell 23 ounces of crack. Bill Clinton's 1994 crime bill was the most aggressive escalation of the war on drugs, funding the expansion of law enforcement and prison construction and increasing harsh sentences, including making 60 crimes capital offenses. Stevenson maintains that fear and anger are threats to justice that make us blind, irrational, and dangerous. In 1992, I began my bureau career as a teacher at a federal prison for 1,200 medium security male inmates. The fact that 5 typewriters in the law library were sufficient for the population clearly demonstrated the fact that the vast majority had taken plea deals instead of going to trial and risking conviction and a harsh mandatory minimum sentence. The U.S. Sentencing Commission acknowledged, quote, "The value of the mandatory minimum sentence lies not in its imposition, but in its value as a bargaining chip to be given away in return for the resource-saving plea from the defendant to a more leniently sanctioned charge." This strategy was extremely efficient and effective, leaving most federal inmates with no option to appeal and no opportunity for parole, while maintaining a growing and very lucrative prison industry. Of course, reducing the length of sentences may decrease the inmate population and make a negative impact on the prison industry, but the means of maintaining a racial caste system is intact, since it is the felon label that causes people to live the rest of their lives as second-class citizens, for whom discrimination, stigma, and exclusion are legal. Drug felons are barred from public housing, ineligible for food stamps, denied licenses for a range of professions, and in many states, permanently denied the right to vote. So what can be done to end mass incarceration, which destroys so many lives, so many families, and so many communities? What can be done to address a system that many believe treats the rich and guilty better than the poor and innocent? Alternatives to incarceration, such as the therapeutic justice pursued in drug courts, is an important step. But I agree with those who say it will take a major social movement. Alexander maintains, "The poor and vulnerable of all colors are a low priority for American leadership. It is this failure to care, really care across color lines, that lies at the core of this system of control and every racial caste system that has existed in the United States or anywhere else in the world." Cornel West says it even more strongly. The social movement, fanned and fueled by this historic book, The New Jim Crow, is a democratic awakening that says we do care. The racial caste system must be dismantled. That we need a revolution in our warped priorities, a transfer from power from oligarchs to the people, and that we are willing to live and die to make it so. I'd like to close with Bryan Stevenson's words of wisdom and compassion. The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the incarcerated, the condemned. We are all implicated when we allow other people to be mistreated. An absence of compassion can corrupt the decency of a community, a state, and a nation. Thank you.
Google Bryan Stevenson, and he speaks all over the country. He has TED Talks. Do yourself a treat and listen to this man speak. Now, for Joe Perez. He'll tell us what we're doing here in Orange County in the collaborative court and the collaborative courts system. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. A little background about myself. I'm a Superior Court judge here in Orange County. I've been on the bench now for about 10 years. I was a public defender for 12 years. And believe it or not, this county, which is considered to be quite conservative, is one of the leading counties in the country when it comes to alternative justice. What's alternative justice? Well, you have to go back a ways in history to try to understand what it's about. I've been in the criminal system now for 22 years, and I have seen this pendulum swing back and forth between massive incarceration, i.e. the 3 strikes law, you heard about it? When you have, when it was passed, you had 2 prior strike, whatever they enumerated was a strike offense. So even before they passed the law, so if you had these charges beforehand, and then you pick up any other felony, which could be petty theft with a prior conviction for theft, you're spending the rest of your life in prison. I want you to think about that one. And so what we had was just this massive filling of our prison systems. One of the number of leading industries in California for a long while was building prisons. And what happened, and what we're seeing happen, is that we started to realize this isn't working. How do we know that? I mean, just walking in, Leslie, I was reading Leslie's note as I walked in. Our recidivism rate, and I'm going to dovetail on some of the panelists, we have more people in prison in our country per capita than any other country in the world. We're putting people away for life for crimes that do not involve injury to anybody. And all of a sudden the federal government came in and said, look, you have to do something. You're getting overcrowded in prisons. And finally there's been a slight movement now back away from that. Is it difficult? Oh yeah. Even within my profession. When I was asked by the person that actually built the collaborative courts, which is Judge Wendy Lindley, she really was a trailblazer that really led all of the country in developing these courts. She built the collaborative court, which is right over here off Main Street, 909 Main Street. She said, do you want to do this? And I said, sure. And I had colleagues that said to me, number 1, it'll ruin your career. Number 2, you're going to be called a social worker with a robe. These are by my colleagues. And number 3, that what you're doing really is not judicial. And every single one of those things, to some extent, came true. That people did warn me of that. What is a collaborative court, and why is this different? Why is this pendulum coming back? Well, I'm sure a public defender will tell you, at least in my experience as a public defender, about 97% of the people that I represented fell within the following group: mentally ill and addicted. And oftentimes a cross-section of those two. That's what we see day in and day out. You go to the prisons and you take a look, and I can almost guarantee you that they fall within one of those two, or they have co-occurring disorders, meaning they have both. And I'll never forget it. Back in the day, this was probably 1995, 96. I was representing an 18-year-old kid that couldn't have been over 18 years in one day. And I'll never forget it. I was up in Fullerton North Court. And back then, the civil possessions were felonies. We had strike offenses. They had a prior strike prior to the enactment of the law. They were looking at 32 months in state prison if they had a prior strike. If they had 2 prior strikes, they could be looking at life. And this 18-year-old kid looked at me and he said, I'm an addict. I committed residential burglaries when I was a kid to support my habit. Those are strikes before this law was enacted.